I would like to welcome everybody for the first seminar of the academic year. Just to remind you, this is the Columbia Digital Finance Seminar Series, which is jointly organized by the Center for Digital Finance and Technologies within the School of Engineering and Applied Sciences and the Digital Finance Initiative led by CIAMAC, my co-organizers. Today we have the pleasure of having with us Itay Goldstein. I think most probably all of you know Itay for his fundamental contribution in the area of finance, but let me briefly introduce him. He is the Ehrenkranz Family Professor and Professor of Finance at Wharton School of University in Pennsylvania. And Itay has basically also a secondary appointment in the Department of Economics and is currently serving as the chair of the Finance Department. And he has made a number of important contributions in the area of corporate finance, financial institutions, financial markets. He has published papers in the top journals of the field, and he also serves as the current executive editor of the Review of Financial Studies, one of the top 3 journals in the area of finance and economics. I personally have known him for a long time, but I first met him in person, I think in 2018, when there was a conference at the Bank of England, because we share a lot of interest. We have some common interests, especially in the area of mutual funds and financial stabilities, and most recently also in the area of fintech. So without further say, I would like to leave the floor to Itay, and looking forward to your talk.
Okay, thank you very much, Agostino, for inviting me and for the introduction. So I will talk about utility tokens as a commitment to competition, which is a paper that I've been working on with 2 former PhD students at Wharton, Diksha Gupta, who is now in Johns Hopkins University, and Ruslan Sverchkov, who is in the University of Warwick. I believe we go to till 7, and I'm happy to take your questions along the way. Let me give you a brief motivation for what we are doing here. I think one of the defining changes in the fintech revolution, the so-called fintech revolution, is to try to bring decentralization into finance. We use words like democratization and decentralization, and trying to improve competition, increase competition in the financial sector. What is interesting, on the other hand, is that at the same time we see that a lot of the technological innovations that we have in the broader economy are actually pushing in the other direction. We see an increase in market power and a decrease in competition when you think about the big platform companies. Examples that come to mind are Amazon and Facebook that are benefiting from concentration, centralization, and market power. This has led to various calls for potentially breaking them apart and maybe trying to reduce their market power. But of course, when you think about that, there is a trade-off. On the one hand, if you break them apart, you may benefit from having more competition, but on the other hand, there are benefits from having everyone on the same platform. You get network externalities, which are probably the original reason why these platforms developed in the first place. What we are trying to investigate here in this paper is to see whether some of the innovations that we saw in fintech, in particular the utility tokens, which I will describe in a minute, whether they can help us restore competition on some of these platforms. And basically, this paper will develop a model, a simple economic framework to think about this thing and basically see how utility tokens can help us potentially bring back the competition and the decentralization and break some of this market power such that at the end of the day, we can potentially enjoy the two benefits at the same time. On the one hand, have a platform that generates all these network externalities, and on the other hand, also have some of the competitive benefit. Okay. So we will explore here the role of utility tokens, and I'm sure you heard about them in many different contexts. Utility tokens, the way we think about them here, are basically crypto tokens that are used as a currency on a platform. So there will be a platform in this model. This is kind of a two-sided online marketplace where you have buyers and sellers of a particular good or service that are meeting on the platform and exchanging this good or service. And the utility token is going to be the currency through which transactions are being made on the platform. There has been a lot written about it. I'll give you a little bit of a real-world background. I think some of it is positive, a lot of it is negative, because we saw a lot of unpleasant phenomena developing with these tokens. But basically what we will show here is that there is a very simple and I think compelling economic rationale for the emergence of such tokens on these platforms. And that will basically be that they are going to help us restore the competitive solution, break the market power that the platform potentially has, and as a result, generate the economic efficiency that we are always associating with the competitive solution. Okay. The model is going to be fairly simple. You will see. I'm going to talk mostly about homogeneous good or service that is being traded on a platform. And you will see that without the token, there will be this tendency for the platform to gather market power and act like a monopoly so that we don't get the maximum surplus from trade on the platform. And then the utility token will enable us to get back to the competitive solution. Because the model is simple, I think one application, sort of real-world application that is most naturally fitting the setup of the model is this platform called Filecoin, which is really a simple platform with homogeneous service. What's going on there is that this is where you can trade storage space online on a cloud. So there will be sellers of space that have extra space and want to rent it. And then there will be buyers or users who need that space, and they will be willing to pay for it. And the coin, Filecoin, is what is used to do this trade. And I think this paper really fits that perhaps in the best way. But I don't want you to think that this is just a model for that, because it is a simple model. I think it applies more generally to other platforms where you don't necessarily have homogeneous services. So one could think about Uber, which of course we all know, where you have drivers and riders, and they are exchanging rides. This is the service. Again, because this is a centralized platform, there is this tendency for the platform to accumulate market power and capture the rents and move away from the optimal surplus. But we will talk about how introducing a token on this platform can help bring us back to competition and efficiency. towards the end, if I have time, I will illustrate an extension that we have where we move away from the homogeneous services into something that is more heterogeneous, and this can apply better to something like Uber. I would say that, extrapolating a bit out of the model, you can also think about more complex platforms like Facebook, for example, if you want to think about sort of ads as the product that is being traded on that platform. And potentially, one could imagine some innovation of this basic mechanism could apply there as well. Let me say a few things about the mechanism and the important features of the platform and the tokens in our model so that you have a good sense of the economic forces before I move on and talk about the actual model that we develop here. So as you will see, it's going to be important that the tokens are going to be the only currency that is used for trading on the platform. There are going to be several features of tokens that are going to be important for our mechanism to work. And one in particular that deserves attention, and I will mention it here, is that there is a fixed token to service price. Okay, so you can imagine that one token buys you 1 unit of service on the platform. This cannot fluctuate over time, and I'll talk more later about whether this is something we see or something that we want to see more in those tokens in the real world. Another important feature of this mechanism is that the token has to be traded in a secondary resale market where it has a floating price relative to an external currency, say the US dollar. Okay, so basically what will happen is that consumers who want to buy the service on the platform are going to basically pay with the token. They're going to give the token to the service providers. Then the service providers will be able to go out and sell that token in a secondary market. And this is really going to be the key for breaking the monopoly power that the platform is going to have on exchanging services between buyers and sellers. Okay? And again, keep that in mind. I'm going to talk about that later on as one of the key properties of the mechanism, the utility tokens in the model. Without that secondary market, it's not going to work. And it's important to keep that in mind because this is now one of the key issues that the SEC is considering when thinking about how to regulate tokens. One thing they say is the fact that there is a secondary market is suggesting that this is more of a security rather than a token. But what we show here is that the presence of this secondary market is actually critical for the tokens to perform the very basic purpose that they have. If you want to think about sort of the mechanism in one sentence, and I will come back to this idea over and over, but just sort of in one sentence, basically what the tokens are doing in this paper is they are transferring the service that is being traded in the platform into a durable good. And by this, they are basically breaking the monopoly power that the platform has. Okay? So to illustrate this, again, think about Uber. Let's say that we have Uber as a platform, and Uber is matching drivers with riders on the platform. Because everyone has to do that through Uber, Uber then has full control over the prices and essentially can charge high prices from the riders, not pay that much to the drivers, capture the full surplus, and then it acts as a monopoly. It will just try to maximize its own profit, and basically set prices above competitive levels to maximize its own profits. What do the tokens do in this context? Well, once everything is done with tokens and tokens are circulating in the system, then Uber essentially loses the full control that it has over the quantity and the price that is set on the platform. So essentially what happens is that every time that Uber is releasing new tokens to the market, it will basically give up some of its market power and have this market power circulate, and this is how we go back to the competitive solution. Yes?
So how is the token created? Is that created at the onset of the platform and they don't change the quantity? Or the owner of the platform has some, kind of decision over how many tokens to issue at each point of time, or does that mechanism matter?
Yes, that's a good question. So they will have the decision power how many tokens to issue at any point in time. The thing is that once they have released some tokens, those tokens are already out there and essentially eating some of their market power. And their decision will be how much to issue at each point in time such that they maximize their profit over time. They make as much as they can out of the market power that they initially have. So essentially they decide on how fast they want to deplete it over how many periods, and that's essentially what the model is going to solve for. But they will choose over time how much they wanna sell, how many tokens they want to release. Yes?
Okay, the first release red tokens. And then we're tired of that. They say now we're doing green tokens, and we're going to trade only with green tokens. Red tokens are gone.
Yes. Right.
They were endowed the red tokens originally with the power of being the trade currency.
Yes.
Now shift to the green tokens.
Right. Yes. So it's important that they cannot do that.
Why not? How could they do the first ones and they cannot do the second one?
Right. So I think this is where the smart contract features will come into play. Basically, when you design it ex ante, you say these are the tokens, this is what they do, this is what they can buy you, and you program ahead of time that every token buys you 1 unit of service, and this is something that you cannot change down the road. Okay, so that's going to be one of the important features here. And I guess it's an even more extreme feature to say that you can only buy 1 unit of service for 1 token. This is something that you cannot back out from.
So quick question. So if we're assuming, let's just say a company already has market power, what's to stop them from just basically extracting more, say, rent by just being a market maker? So what I mean is like, hey, you have dollars, well, you need to use these things, so we'll charge you a small fee, go into dollars, we'll give you some of these tokens, and then you can pay for these goods. So I'm just thinking of...
So you're saying that they're going to charge something in addition to the tokens, for example?
Yeah, I'm just trying to think of how this model can be. If I'm somebody who's, okay, this has been thrust upon me, and I'm a company that has market power, either we already have that market power, so we don't have to charge anything, but I have it, so I'll charge a small fee for converting between dollars and this token that has been thrust upon us.
Yes. Yeah, so again, this is going to be, again, one of the features that we will require from the tokens here. I'm going to have 4 properties that are important for this to work. I think you can commit to all of them with the smart contract, but this is something we can discuss more. I will say, I think some of it could be potentially supplemented with regulation. So to the extent that maybe platforms do not have the incentive ahead of time to commit to something like that, and I will try to talk about when they might have and when they might not have. But to the extent that they don't have the will to commit to something like that, then this is something that regulation could take care of. And I will say, I think those tokens are a pretty tractable way to regulate these platforms. Yeah.
So just follow up on Gore's point about the commitment to use the tokens and how smart contracts come in. It's not enough that the platform commits to honor the tokens that have been created. It needs to commit not to create other types of tokens. So if we created
Yes.
red tokens, I commit not to create green tokens in the future.
Right.
And that is far more difficult to do with smart contracts than committing to honor the old tokens, because then basically the whole platform needs to be a smart contract, and wouldn't that limit applicability of this model?
Yes, fair enough. I think, again, I'll talk more about the critical features, and then you can see how much of it you think is feasible to commit to and how much is not. I will say, I think you can achieve a fair amount of commitment with the smart contracts. To the extent that something cannot, then this is something that regulation could potentially supplement the mechanism. So essentially, you can imagine regulators saying, if you want to operate this kind of platform, then it has to operate with tokens. And then the mechanism emerges from there. But we'll see sort of what are the critical features, and each one can decide what they think, to what extent smart contracts alone can achieve that. Yeah.
So in terms of using smart contracts, so would just the token flow and the mechanism related to token be controlled through smart contracts, or like the basic functionality of some functionalities on the platform would also be controlled with smart contracts, considering that?
I mean, essentially what the smart contracts need to do is to program in the features of the tokens and what tokens are doing. So tokens are buying you one service unit per token, and you can only use the tokens to buy the service on the platform and so on. I think that's enough. I don't think on top of that you need them to do more. Okay, so that will be the idea behind the utility tokens. Connecting it to what we saw in the real world. I think the paper helps us understand what could be the motive behind utility tokens. Obviously, in the real world, the experience was not great in the sense that there was a wave of ICOs, but then a lot of them were probably fraud or borderline fraud, leading the SEC to basically put a stop on this. And nowadays, it's sort of still in a limbo, trying to figure out what will be the regulatory status of that. I think there is some economic rationale for these tokens, at least the way it comes out of the model. And the model also suggests what are the features that are important for them to work. And in that sense, I think it can help us think through what will be the optimal way to regulate them. So I'll come back more to these issues later on. Very briefly, I mean, the paper is obviously related to a large evolving literature on tokens. And I think that this is the first paper that makes the point that they allow commitment to competitive pricing. The paper has relation to older literature on durable good monopolists, and the idea that when you're a monopolist, but this is a durable good, you're losing some of your market power because you're competing with goods that were sold in the past. And essentially, the paper shows that the token mechanism makes those services, which are, of course, by nature non-durable, makes them into durable goods to some extent. And this is how the tokens help us gain competition. Okay. So I will try to give you most of the economic idea with a two-period example. The paper has a more extensive model. After I show you the two-period example, I will describe what is in the fuller model, but I think you can really understand the basic idea from this two-period example. So suppose that there are two periods, and suppose that there is a platform that is matching between service providers and consumers. And again, you can think about Uber, where the service is rides, and then the providers are the drivers, and the consumers are the riders. Let's say that the service has a cost of C in each period, period 1 and period 2. 1 unit of service costs C. And let's say that each period you have a group of heterogeneous consumers who value this service differently. Okay? In particular, let's say that a fraction alpha h puts a value of VH, a high value VH on this service, and then a fraction alpha L, which is 1 minus alpha h, puts a low value of VL on this service. And we say that both VH and VL are greater than the cost C, so VH is higher than VL, and both of them are greater than C. So the optimal thing will be to have everyone consume this service. Okay. Right now in the 2-period example, there is no discount factor, but in the Fuller model, we also have a discount factor, and the discount factor, how big it is important for determining the pace at which tokens will be released. Okay? So what's going on in the basic model is that before you have tokens, is that the platform is essentially going to act as a monopoly. Okay, so because the platform has control over all the matching, basically what they can do is they can pay drivers their reservation price, which is C, because this is what it costs them to provide the service. But then they can charge riders whatever they are willing to pay. So they could charge VH from the consumers who have the high value. And then they can choose. They can only choose one price. They can't obviously discriminate. So they can choose whether they want to charge a low price of VL and have everyone consume the service, or they want to charge a high price of VH and have only the alpha H consumers consume the service. And of course, to make it interesting, we say that they're better off, they're making a higher profit if they charge VH from the alpha H consumers and essentially ration the low value consumers. Okay, so this will be an inefficient outcome. Okay, so this is what will happen without tokens, yes.
Do you have any network effect here? You're talking about platforms, so is there a network effect?
Right. So we're going to introduce network effects later on. So in one of the extensions, I will introduce network effects. For the basic model, we don't introduce them because it's not really important for the main point. But later on, when we think about competition between different platforms, then it will be important to think about network effects within one platform, and then we will introduce them.
So typically when we talk about platforms, network effects play big role. Like this is what distinguishes platform from just good producer,
right?
Seller, and that affects the pricing, right? We want to maybe lower the price to include larger amount of people on one side so that we can charge higher price on the other side.
Yes.
We don't have any of it here.
Not in the basic model, but we have it later on. So really, I mean, the way network effects become very important in the model is once we think about, is it better to have one platform with tokens or multiple platforms that are standard and are competing with each other? And then it will be important to introduce the network effects. The basic solution of what happens within one platform is not affected by the network effects. It will only change the prices, but it doesn't affect the way that tokens bring us to competition. Where it will be critical is really only once you think about comparing one platform with multiple platforms. So then I will introduce it. Okay, so this is what's going on in the basic model without tokens. Basically, if you think about the platform will find it optimal to set a high price VH and only have the alpha H high value consumers consuming the service, and the platform will do that both in time 1 and in time 2. Okay, so basically every period they will just have those services provided at a price of VH, and basically have only part of the consumers enjoying the service. And again, surplus is of course not maximized. Now, let's think about introducing tokens and think about what the tokens will do and how they will break the market power of the platform. A few things to say about the tokens. First, services on the platform can only be purchased using tokens, as I mentioned before. We say that the platform initially controls the tokens and will basically sell them gradually and decide how fast to sell them, how many to issue. Each token can be exchanged for 1 unit of the service, okay? Tokens will then be bought and sold in the resale market. So tokens are exchanged in the first period, and then the providers of service have those tokens, they can resell them. And finally, a technical thing that basically implies that tokens don't lose value at the end in a finite period model is to say that providers can redeem the tokens with the platform for a price of C at the end, at time 2, okay? We don't need that if we have an infinite horizon model, but once you have a finite horizon model, then this is important so that the value does not unravel, okay? So if you think about the timeline, then at time 1, there will be a token market in the beginning. The platform will decide how many tokens to release, and then consumers will buy those tokens. Then the platform market happens, so consumers take their tokens and buy services from the providers. They consume. Then at time 2, again, there is a token market. The platform will release more tokens. But what is important here is that the platform doesn't have full control over the tokens that are circulating, because there will be additional tokens that are coming in from the providers of the services who got the tokens in the previous period. So they are also putting their tokens in the market. At that point, the platform market happens again. So all the consumers who bought tokens will consume those services. And then at the end, consumers are going to consume, and producers are going to redeem their tokens against the platform. Okay? So what will be the solution in this model with tokens? And again, what the platform has to decide is how many tokens to release to the market at each period. The optimal thing that they decide to do is the following. They basically decide to release alpha H tokens in period 1, and then the remaining alpha L tokens in period 2. Okay? So basically, at time 1, they are capturing the high value on a limited amount of tokens. Okay? That's the optimal thing for them to do. But then at period 2, they can no longer get any value on the tokens that they already released. Those are already out there. So if they want to get any additional profit, they have to release additional tokens. And basically, they will release whatever is there to satisfy the rest of the demand. So basically, the quantity that is consumed is going to be alpha H at time 1, but it's going to be alpha H plus alpha L at time 2, and the price is going to decrease from VH at period 1 to VL at period 2. Yes?
So can the high value consumers wait until period 2 to consume?
So they are getting utility from the service at any period. Okay, so if you think about them as long-lived,
Actually, so they consume both.
yeah, so they consume both, yes. So they will consume at time 1 for VH and at time 2 for VL. In the main model, to make things a little easy, we think about them as short-lived, so every period there are new consumers. But even if they are long-lived, they can continue to consume every period. Okay, yeah.
Would it be more accurate to say the high value is more urgent than the low value? I think I'm alluding to his point of waiting until later periods to accumulate some of this token. Is it fair to think of that intuitively as people with low patience versus people with high patience to consume this?
So again, I wouldn't think about this as patience because really every period they get utility from the service again. Think about it as rides. It's not like, if you took a ride today, it's not like you're not going to need a ride tomorrow. It's just a matter of what is the value that you assign to it any period. Yeah.
So for the low value users, like to get onboarded on the platform, they would need to get these tokens, which are actually sold out afterwards, like after on T2 they would be sold.
Right.
So aside from the monetary incentive which they would get and the basically they would buy the tokens at a lower cost or a higher cost than what the high value users want. What would be the thing?
I mean, the lower value are not willing to pay VH, right?
Yeah.
So in the first period, tokens are selling for VH. So you are a low value consumer. You are there in the platform, you just choose not to buy.
Okay.
In the second period, the platform has released more tokens. At that point, you say, now the price is VL, so now I want to buy. Okay, so it's not that they are not there, but they are just not finding it worthwhile in the first period.
Okay. Okay, I get that. But then what about driving the value of afterwards of the token? Say if the value is going down, why wouldn't the alpha H people dump their tokens in the whole market down the line?
I mean, they are basically what they do is they buy the tokens and then they use the tokens, right? So in period 1, they buy the tokens for VH, but they use them to buy the service.
Okay.
And then in period 2, they come again and they buy new tokens for whatever price it is now.
Okay.
So they don't save the tokens. It's not in their interest to do that.
Okay, and then last question. So whenever they use this whatever token for the service, would that token be burned or would it still be in the flow?
No, it's still in circulation. And that's the key, that the token is still there and the token is continuing to compete with the platform, and this is how the platform is essentially losing its market power. Yeah.
So it seems like you're committing to larger and larger quantities of supply over time.
Right.
But if the supply curve, let's say, varies from period to period, can you end up in a point where the inefficiency is the other way around, that you're actually oversupplying in certain periods if the cost C fluctuates from period to period?
So you're saying maybe the cost C is increasing and then there are too many tokens out there. Yeah, that's interesting. I think something like that could happen. We do talk about fluctuating demand in the paper, but we only talk about demand potentially increasing over time. But I think you could run into something like that if demand falls or the cost increases. Yeah.
Can you, in that case, just allow the provider to buy back?
Yes, they could potentially do that. I mean, right now, they never find it optimal to buy back the tokens because if they, the price is always decreasing essentially. So if they buy back, they will then need to sell it later on at a lower price. So they don't find it optimal to do it. But if they had information that the price is potentially increasing, then they may choose to do it. That could make it sort of interesting to think about. And I think it will obviously complicate the dynamics. But I think the key idea of how the tokens reduce their market power is still there.
So can you elaborate how the first period tokens affect the second period price? So high valuation users, they buy a token and then they use the token, and therefore the sellers now hold the tokens.
Yes.
And what happens in the second period?
So then the sellers go to the secondary market to sell the tokens to the consumers of the second period.
And if the platform released more tokens, then now the second period price will be this VL.
Exactly.
And the sellers know that they will get only VL for
Yes.
this.
Right. Yes. Mm-hmm.
So I can see why this can function, like as a growth strategy. But like once the user base of the platform is saturated, like in this scenario, there is no way of generating more revenue for the platform owner, but there will be always a constant like maintenance cost of the platform. So like once the platform reach the like a steady saturated process, then what is the way, like what is the mechanism for generating more revenue as the platform? So like
Yes.
what is the incentive for me to not to shut down the business but still keep making it possible for the existing user base?
Yes. No, that's a good point. I mean, this is the simplified model with two periods. Our main model has many periods, and the platform is releasing more and more tokens over time. So as long as there are some pockets of demand that could still be saturated, then the platform can still make some profit, although the profit is decreasing. I think one way to think about it is growing demand over time. That will basically, reduce the market power, the relative market power of the platform over time, but will not completely eliminate its potential for making profit. So I think that would be probably a version that would have that, and they could still continue to make profits. Yeah.
So I'm trying to understand how the model works in continuous time. So if the buyer of the service give the token to the seller, who immediately bring the token back, right? So you don't have to wait for the second period. If the services can be performed, say, in Uber within 10 minutes, then the supply of tokens just add back to the pool. So would that, in a continuous time, would that price drop immediately to the marginal cost C?
It could potentially drop very fast, yes. You will see what happens in the main model when we go to many periods. Basically, it will gradually drop. But obviously, if you reduce the gap between different periods, then this will happen very fast, yes.
So I'm trying to understand, why would platform want to issue tokens? It seems that it's going to get higher profits without tokens.
Yes, that's right, yes. So I'm going to talk about this. In many cases, they don't have an incentive to do it. And this is where regulation could potentially come in and say, if you want to operate this thing, then you need to have tokens. We talk in the paper about cases where they will have an inherent incentive to do it. And this is coming mostly from competition. So if there is a threat that a new platform will enter, then you can essentially reduce their incentive to enter by tokenizing, and then you reduce the extent to which profits can be made. Okay, yeah.
You mentioned Uber, so I want to understand the time scale here. Can you proceed with the analogy to Uber? At 5 p.m., we start the process, and then 5 to 5:15 is the first period, and we've exhausted the urgent demand, and now we're talking about the second period, etc. Or is it today 5 o'clock, and tomorrow 5 o'clock? So
yeah,
we exhausted. Today we gave service to everyone, service today. Now they're reborn. It's a renewal process, and tomorrow they're reborn. Which is the way?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. I'm not. It's related to Chiron, what you said. I'm not sure what's the best period, to be honest.
But that's not fair. You started with Uber as an example. Right. Please continue.
Yeah. I mean, you could think about it as a daily basis, but also, I think, to make it more interesting, than demand potentially growing over time. But you're right. I mean, it's a good question. It's worth thinking more about it, like kind of calibrating it. But this is obviously stylized. It just gives you the idea, and then you can decide.
I would say stylized, but My question was also stylized. Is it 5 o'clock to 5:15? Is 5 today versus 5 tomorrow? Or is
Yeah.
it-
You know, I would think about it probably 5 today versus 5 tomorrow. But to be honest, I'm not sure that's the best answer. I mean, someone else may think that we should think about periods differently.
So with file share,
Uh-huh.
you pay for a period of time, right?
Yeah, right. Yes.
So month, week,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it could be a month. Yeah. Okay. Just to recap what's going on here, and you know, I won't have that much time for the rest, but I think at least I gave you the main idea, and I will sort of go quickly over the rest. But basically, the way to think about it is the platform has limited stock of market power, and by releasing tokens, it kind of gives this away, and it optimally chooses to sort of reap the benefit first, and then it has no choice, so it kind of goes to the next level and releases more tokens at a lower price. But the tokens essentially make this service durable and essentially imply that the platform has only limited market power that it can sort of spread out over time, but it can't continue to enjoy it over and over again. Okay? The full model basically looks at T periods with a discount factor of delta. Then there is a long-lived platform, and there are short-lived consumers and producers. We think about N types of consumers with valuations from V1 to Vn. So V1 will be the highest valuation of V upper bar, and Vn will be the lowest valuation of V lower bar, and then you have a whole range in between. But even for that lowest valuation, still the value from the service is higher than the cost. Okay? In a monopoly, what happens is very similar to what we described before. What the platform will do is just choose the same price and the same quantity every period based on the thing that maximizes their profit. And there will always be some rationing, so they would always choose not to provide the service to everyone. And again, the key friction is that the providers and the consumers can only meet through the platform, so the platform can extract the full rent. But now when we introduce tokens, then we can potentially achieve those benefits that I described in the two-period model. The timing that we have in mind is, again, we think about the consumers and producers as short-lived. So consumers who are born at time T, they basically start by buying tokens either from the platform or from the previous period providers. Then they buy their good and consume. Then the providers who are born at time T, they provide the service. And then at time T plus 1, they go and sell their tokens to the next generation consumers and so on. This is how it evolves from period to period. The equilibrium here will be the following. Basically, what the platform will do is release tokens over time, okay, such that the quantity of tokens out there is going to increase and the price is going to decrease over time. Yes.
Is that fair from the platform's perspective to issuing expiring tokens? So rather than durable tokens,
yes.
In principle, you can imagine expiring tokens.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Is that fair?
So here we don't allow that, but it is potentially interesting to.
And they maintain the monopoly forever. Yeah. At least at first sight.
Yeah. I mean, going back to the question on, you know, what keeps them going. If they gave up all their market power, say, over a year, then why will they continue after that? You could imagine, actually, that those expiring tokens will actually keep it going. Yeah. So that could be an interesting thing to consider. Right now, we talk about it as, you know, it essentially goes down to full competition after a number of periods. But if that is a problem because there is nothing that keeps them going, then you could imagine actually tokens that expire after some point in time, and then they do keep some market power at each period. In this model, if delta is equal to 1, then we will get to the competitive outcome after exactly n periods. If delta is lower than 1, then we get to the competitive solution before n periods, because the platform will choose to issue tokens more quickly to reap more benefits early on. So that's kind of, and the intuition, I think, is very similar to what we discussed. It's important to note that we need those platform rules for this to work. And I will highlight 4 rules. One is that there is this secondary resale market. So everyone can go and sell their tokens and buy tokens in that market. We don't have that market, then, and everything goes through the platform, then the platform is back to being a monopoly. So this feature that some people view as a problem with tokens, having this secondary market, is actually crucial for this to work. As we discussed, it's important that the firm cannot charge any additional fee, because if the platform could now say, you know, you pay with a token, but you also need to pay $5 in order to use this, then it can go back to the monopoly. If this is unlimited, they can basically reap the benefits again. It's important that tokens are the only mean of payment in the platform, and you don't have sort of side payments between the producers and the consumers. And as I mentioned, it's also important that the price of a unit of service is fixed in tokens. Because if you let that price fluctuate, then those tokens lose value over time, okay? Maybe they can lose some value, but you can't let them fully fluctuate, because then it will go back to all the market power goes to the platform, okay? Again, the implications, so the tokens essentially address the key friction. If the platform was in full control over the matching, now that it released the tokens, it loses that control. It's important to note that each one of these platform rules is critical, so that could help us think about how these markets should be designed and regulated going forward. You know, I will say, when you think about real-world tokens, there are tokens out there that have one feature or 2 features, but not all of them at the same time. So in some sense, it is sort of a way to think about the design going forward, not to explain the tokens that we had in the past. I think those features are there, but the combination is what is important. So I have just a few minutes left. I'll just talk about a few of these extensions that we have. So think about platform competition. This is when we introduce the network externalities. So let's ask the following question. Suppose that we compare one platform with tokens to 2 platforms that don't have tokens. What will be better? For this to be a meaningful question, we need to bring in these network externalities to create some benefit for having everyone on the same platform. And the way that we model this is to say, let's say that every consumer gets a value, so consumer I gets a value VI, but gets an additional value that depends on how many people are currently on the platform. Okay, so this is where the network externalities are coming from. And there are many ways, obviously, to justify this. At the end of the day, this is the main point why you have a platform to begin with. The equilibrium analysis for how tokens are released over time and prices move over time doesn't change. I mean, the prices will be different to reflect these different valuations, but the dynamics of it, how the quantity of tokens goes up and the price of tokens go down, this stays the same. With this in mind, what we can show, and is fairly clear, is that it is always better to have one tokenized platform than having 2 standard platforms. Because the tokenized platform essentially achieves the competitive solution after a while, okay? So in the long run, it's better, not necessarily through the whole path, but in the long run, it's better. Because the tokenized platform achieves the competitive solution, and then you also benefit from the full network externalities. So you don't need to give up network externalities for more competition. Okay? As I mentioned before, I think that incorporating this competition between platforms also helps us think through cases where platforms will choose to tokenize without being told to do so. And we developed this in the paper. Two cases that we developed. One is in which, suppose that you have one platform that operates, an incumbent, but there is a threat of entry from another platform. It could be optimal for the incumbent platform to tokenize to deter from the second platform from entering, okay? A second case is where a new entrant will enter with tokens in order to compete with an incumbent. So in general, when you have competition between platforms, this is where you can imagine that they choose to tokenize and they don't need to be told by regulators to do it. As I said before, when this is not enough to cause them to tokenize, then I think you can think about regulation as a supplement, and then regulators could essentially maintain competition with tokens. I think it's much easier. You just put those tokens there and then it takes care of itself instead of always checking what they're doing. Yes.
So you're envisioning this as a way of preserving the monopolist but keeping it honest in a way and preventing it from excess rent seeking. If I understand correctly,
Yes.
which is distinct from like the more purest crypto view, like with a Filecoin, which is to just eliminate the monopolist altogether. And then it just becomes a community-owned and managed solution.
Yes. Yes.
I think that's where some of the confusion as to like Gord's question as to like, you know, you issue red coins and then blue coins later, or how all of that would work. If it's a purely decentralized solution, that's not a concern, because somebody deploys a smart contract. The code says what can or cannot be done, and then both the suppliers and users opt in or not. And then if that's it.
Yeah.
It's a little bit different than if like the existing monopolist just says, well, we're going to tokenize the service that we provide.
Right. Yes. Yeah, I think that's a good description.
It's sort of like part of my thought was, since you're tying in regulation, sort of and I'm probably missing something, but what's the fundamental difference between, let's say, the government requiring anybody who, you know, sells toilet paper, you know, certain types of goods, to post, you know, what they're willing to sell these for, and everybody comes there to, you know, say, oh, I'm willing to pay this much, you know, just hold an auction. But in US dollars. So I'm trying to think about removing that cap on, you know, a fixed price and involving regulation. Like, what's the fundamental difference between, you know, this and just the government saying, hey, all these platforms, you gotta post your prices on this government website, and that's where consumers go. Essentially removing any, you know, price differentials or any rent seeking that can happen. What's the fundamental difference?
I mean, I think if the government wanted to do it directly with prices, the government will have to essentially determine prices. And I think that's more difficult to do, because now if you think about a dynamic world where demand and supply are potentially changing, then determining a price every period is going to be very difficult.
I'm thinking like just anybody posts, I have this much storage on my computer, and this much, I can put in, you know, an order that says willing to accept the highest bidder or anything like that. Like they just hold an auction, so they don't need.
So basically, they're not doing it through the platform.
No, it's just anybody who has these resources. You go up here and you sell it. You know, you compete with others to sell it, and other people have a certain willingness to buy at a certain price. Just a market for.
Yeah, but then you cancel the platform, because we basically.
That's what I'm trying to think. Like, what's the end result of this? And it's alluding to his situation, his question, which was, okay, you're not trying to eliminate monopolies per se, but you're trying to have the best of both worlds. So that's where I'm trying to figure out what I'm missing with the best of both worlds part, because I'm thinking of
Yeah.
Just basically removing the monopoly altogether. So
Right.
that's hodgepodge.
Yes, I mean, if you got rid of the monopoly operating the platform, then you get the competitive solution. But we basically start from a case saying, you know, this is the platform, this is what they do, they have the power, and now can we still achieve the competitive solution on the platform? I don't know, for me it's a little more difficult to imagine that you get rid of them altogether.
What happens if halfway through one of the parameters changes?
Say it again?
What happens if halfway through one of the parameters changes?
Yeah,
If the price system,
right.
it's adaptable and it's flexible, it can changes and accommodates all sides.
Yes.
What happens if one of the parameters changes?
Yeah, so we actually consider that. So if there is demand uncertainty and we say, suppose that midway at some point there is a shift in demand, it continues to work. I mean, the platform is going to adjust the release of tokens. And basically, you know, once there is an increase in demand, they will reap the benefit from those new consumers, for example, and not continue to the next level of low valuation. So it will delay the depletion of market power. But it will still continue in the sense that the tokens out there are going to continue to compete with the platform and push towards the competitive solution. So, I think this is where the benefit of these tokens comes from, as opposed to have a regulator saying, you know, these are the prices. Because if there was a regulator saying these are the prices, the regulator will have to come in every period and say, this is the price. The tokens create the mechanism that will move towards the competitive solution. And even if it doesn't achieve that immediately, it will continue to move in that direction.
So in your competitive, results for competition, how sensitive the results are to particular way of modeling? So it seems to me that you are modeling the competition as perfect substitute, platforms are perfect substitutes. What if they're on hot-link line and there is some different horizontal differentiation? Because we know that with network effects, in fact, the price competition is more fierce than without network effects. So if we go back to the pure competitive pricing, the prices may be higher than with network effects.
Yes.
So I don't know whether the welfare effect is still standing, that tokenization is better.
So what we did with the network effects, it does stand, it's still there, because you still get the same patterns of prices and quantities, even though the prices are different, to account for the network effects. So that's not changing it.
Competition. It seems to me that with tokens the prices may be lower than without tokens.
Yes, with tokens the prices will be lower than without tokens. That's right. But the network externalities are pushing the prices higher than without network externalities. But it's still the same effect of the tokens. And yeah, the last thing we do is also think about heterogeneous services and basically you can kind of convert the different types of services into the same underlying unit and put it in one demand function, and it basically, again, goes through, except that it will, again, slow it down. But heterogeneity is not going to kill that as well. So I think we're out of time, so just stop here.
I think,
But I think we had a lot of questions and covered everything.